righty, ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, can you hear me okay? Yes. Perfect. I just want to take a moment to thank you all so much for being here tonight. Welcome to History Night, our first ever History Night. We have an incredible turnout for tonight. In case you haven't seen, we did end up putting more chairs in. When we first initially envisioned tonight, we imagined about 50 people or so. We ended up putting that cap up to 70, so there are 70 of you here tonight. We are so excited. Give yourselves a round of applause. Our goal tonight is to celebrate the rich history of the club, as well as to celebrate the individuals who brought us here and helped establish the club that we are all a part of today. We have some amazing individuals here tonight, people that helped in the planning, establishment, and of course the continuation of the club after it was sold by Mr. Powers. That being said, I would love to introduce the lovely gentleman here next to me. This is our Preservation Committee. Tom Boyle, Chet Dovis, Don Tarenga, Mark Heaney, and Doug Angel. Gentlemen, we want to thank you all so much for being here. There are two original committee members who wanted to be here, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, could not make it tonight. That is Chris Heaney and Rich Peller. They are with us in spirit, so we want to thank them as well for their contribution. Presenting and giving his invaluable insights today, as you might have seen from his beautiful mugshot on today's flyer, is Don Tarenga. When Don Tarenga and I first initially spoke about history, or Briar Ridge Country Club's history, it was when many of you may have noticed the history wall that we have out in the hallway. So that was established about a year and a half ago, and I quickly found out that there are very few people that match his knowledge in terms of where we came from as a club. So we are excited to have him up here today. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't note Mr. Joe Williamson. He was scheduled to speak today as well. Unfortunately, he suffered a severe personal loss and was unable to make it today. So we offer him our most heartfelt condolences and want to thank him for being willing to speak today as well. So if we could give a round of applause for him. Now, I know you've had enough of me, but I'd like to start by asking our GM, Sean Shai, up here for just a quick moment. He is definitely an individual that does not like to make things about himself. He definitely does not like to draw attention, but I do want to make sure that he gets credit because the truth is he did a lot to set this evening in motion. And not only that, but he has been a huge part of the planning organization of this evening as a whole, and without him, this evening would not be possible. So, Todd, if you would come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Noel. Obviously, for me, I'll keep this very brief. I get the pleasure of introducing Mr. Tarenga here. I think it's fair to note that we have a great room of outstanding people ranging from the originals to the last couple of years. The club has yet to reach its 50th birthday. That really puts us at a very young club in comparison to a lot that are around us. So when I started, the preservation of our history and started to gather some of that was a very big deal. I asked Noel to put together the clippings and history wall because we don't have a lot of that in the club necessarily. So we have a cool bit of artifacts around the room if you didn't have a chance to look at. It's neat to display those things in the club, and it's cool that we're going to learn where we started, where we came from, and really understand where we're going. So thank you guys for being here. We are very excited. It means a lot to us to take that journey. And without further ado, a gentleman that I think you framed probably too much, Mr. Don Tarenga.
Thank you very much, Don. My name is Don Tarenga. I am the owner of Tarenga Engineering in Munster, Indiana, with my brother. We inherited it from my father, who passed away in 1982. And when I was first asked to come up here and speak, I wondered, why would they want me to come and speak? Anyway, it turns out that Don Powers was my uncle. He was my father's brother as a reason. And we started the development with Mr. Powers back in 1975 or so. So at that time, I actually was in college. I got out in 77. But I've pretty much been here since the inception of everything that Briar Ridge has today. So I thought, that'll be great. I'll get up there, I'll talk to Joe Williamson, we'll talk about the golf course. I will talk about the development. As you heard, Joe Williamson is So I met with Joe Williamson last week, and I picked his brain. I got as much information as I could from him. So if there's anything that I say that you think is wrong, or if there's anything that you don't agree with, it's Joe Williams. With that, I'm going to start. And I thought for a long time, where do you start on something like this? Well, as you see on the slide, Indiana became a state in 1816. 1816 was an interesting year. There's a couple of things that I have listed up there. This was shortly after the Revolutionary War, which ended in 1783. And it was shortly after, and it was almost immediately after the War of 1812, which ended in 1815. So what happened when the Indiana became a state? The federal government decided that they had no money because they had spent it all on wars. They needed to sell land. So in order to sell land, there was no way that they could sell land in Indiana without having a survey done. So that's kind of what I do anyway. So that's why I know so much about their city. I mean, you look at it and you say, okay, I'm going to buy a piece of property from my neighbor. And the neighbor says, okay, I'll sell you my backyard. Go from that tree over to that rock, back over to here and back over. And we'll think about it, you can't sell land like that. So what happened is in 1834, after the government actually got some money together, they authorized thousands of surveyors to go out and survey the state of Indiana. Now, what you see on that map right there is that is one of the drawings that was done after they did the survey. It represents squares throughout the whole state. Each one of those squares is 36 square miles, 6 by 6 by 6. What the surveyors actually did was 1 square miles, 1 by 1 by 1. And those squares, as you see on there, they located any rivers that existed in the area. I think you'll find some interesting points on there if you look at it closely. It lists all the various treaties that federal government had come up with the Indians and the Louisiana. For instance, right across the middle, it's a treaty at St. Mary, October 2nd, Peru 6th, 1818. So when they purchased the property, when they actually made a mistake and they wanted to sell the property to people, those treaties pretty much went by the wayside. And the Indians that lived here, Potawatomi Indians, were forced out. So, as I said, the government didn't have any money. So what they did is they ordered a survey, and those survey crews went out in 8-man crews. What do you think? Well, that's a lot of people. Well, 4 men were surveyors, and 4 men of that group were the people who foraged for food, and they were the ones that protected them from bears that were still bears. Anyway. That was Joe Williams' fault.
That's a big deal.
Hey, what the heck is going on? What do you know? Do I have to stand back? So I'm not going to go into great detail in regards to the survey, but what I'm showing up here is this is one of the drawings that was done, and it was all hand drawn back in 1840. And on the right, those are notes that the surveyors had actually taken, and then they were brought back to the capital of the state, to Corydon, not Indianapolis. And they transcribed all of that information by hand with full test. These books, this is just one page out of a book that I have in my office. My books in my office only count Lake County and Porter County, and I have about 150 pages, like that, along with the maps and other 100 pages. And you figure that the entire state had that. So, with that, on the very bottom, if you get up here closely and you look, we'll see that every single time that a surveyor finished one of those 36 square miles, he had to sign that this is a true survey, and this survey represents exactly what is in that area, and he signed it his name, and it was made out to the Attorney General of the United States. So with that pretty much ends the survey part. So I'm going to go into the Hart Farm, which is where Briar Ridge was originally. That's where Briar Ridge is, and it was at the farm, the Hart Farm. These are two pictures. These pictures actually stood in the hallway here for probably close to 40 years. They didn't have any caption on them other than Aaron Hart and Mary Dyer Hart. Everybody walked by these pictures and they said, oh, hey, that's great. Small deep and consistency. Didn't tell you who they were or what it was. Maybe we still have them in a closet somewhere, but the point is, these are the most important people in where you live today. Mary Dyer, it's interesting to notice that her name is spelled D-Y-R-E. She was the person that they named the town of Dyer after. The question is, why did they misspell it? So getting into Aaron Hart. Aaron Hart was a very wealthy person. He lived in Philadelphia. He owned a book publishing. Met Mary, and they got married at 1844. So after about 6 to 7 years, Aaron Hart decided, I don't want to be a book publisher anymore. I've made enough money. I want to do something else. And he had an interest in the American Union. He also had a tremendous interest in being a farmer. So by this time, the survey that I talked about previously had been done. And the federal government opened up all this open land where they could write legal descriptions, they could sell the property to people. And Mr. Hart purchased 20,000 acres in northwest Atlanta. I mean, holy man. 20,000 acres, if you don't know much about property. That's approximately what he purchased. What that represents, if you look at this map closely, you'll see on the north side of what he purchased is called the Calumet River, which we now know as Little Calumet. In the lower left-hand corner of the orange square is Plum Creek, T-L-D-L-E-S, Wisdom. And what's interesting to notice about this is that Plum Creek flows into a black area. I don't know, can you see that? What that is on this map, it is listed as Lake George. It actually has another name, it's called the Katy Marsh. But being closer at the map, it says water, standing water between 1 to 8 feet deep. So the surveyors, when they got to that, they either waded through the marsh or they went around. But the fact of the matter is, what Mr. Hart purchased was a swamp. So anyway, he took his wife and he moved to northwest Indiana, and they built a house at 135 Joliet Street, which, for those of you that aren't familiar with what that is, that was 135 Joliet Street is the parking lot for the Jewel grocery store in downtown Dyer. Or for those of you who know it better, it's the parking lot for the White Rhino. That house stood until about 1985, when it was finally up. So there's no records. Doesn't say anything about what Mr. Hart bought when he first visited his property, because he bought it sight unseen. What I didn't mention is the price. The $81 per acre. Wow. So that square, that large square that you see up there, currently is the towns of Munster, Highland, Griffith, half of Sharonville, and half of Dyer. So anyway, he showed up here, and he went to the property, I assume, and he realized, I have to do something to get this water off the property. Otherwise, I'm never going to be able to sell this. I'm never going to be able to farm it. So he immediately went out. He started hiring men. He bought oxen, bought mules, horses, and he started zigging a series of drainage ditches in the area. Now you think about that today, you want a drainage ditch built, you are about that you hire some company and they take a backbone and they dig. In that day, there was no such thing. What they had, they called them hand, and it was nothing more than a box with sharp edges on it that the mule and oxen pulled along the ground. Two men stood behind it and held it up on the back end so they could dug into the ground. When the box filled up, they let it out of the ditch. These two men dumped that box. Now, probably had somewhere in your 10 cubic yards in it, which would be around 1,000 pounds. So this was not easy funny. What Mr. Hart realized is that the reason his property was filling up with water was because of a large sand ridge on the north side of it that stopped the water from being able to get to the Calumet River. So I'm going to hesitate a second here, stop a second, I'm going to go to the next slide. What I've done here is I've taken a outline of what the perimeter of Briar Ridge looks like, and I've positioned it in the property that Mr. Hart built, Part 1. When you notice, it's all in the lake. Every bit of it is in the lake. So anyway, Mr. Hart started to dredge the best that he could, and he was digging through this ridge line. And the ridge line that he was digging through was Ridge Road. And managed to, after about 10 years, to dig a channel deep enough that it started draining his property. And the first thing that they did, or they made, is that ditch after it. They call it Hart Ditch. Hart Ditch is also Fum Creek, which is a ditch that is on the west side of Briarwood Country Club. Now, when he got to the little Calumet River, people don't really know where he dug this through Ridge Road. So to describe it, it's the west side of Wicker Park and Wicker Park Golf Course. When it hits the little Calumet River, probably the best way to describe it, the intersection was at hole number 13 of Old Woodmark Country Club. It was about 125-yard par 3. You hit over the little Calumet River, and on your right-hand side was a bench entry. So, with that being said, after about 10 years, Mr. Hart's property started to strain, and railroads decided they wanted to come in this area. So again, that's his property, and you'll see two railroads there. Those railroads represent the Joliet Cutoff, which is the railroad that runs that way. That was a railroad that was installed because the downtown Chicago was just an absolute mess. And people, the railroads hated the idea of the congestion. So they built a railroad through Indiana. They happened to go through part of Mr. Hart's property. That was constructed in 1854. The one that is at an angle going up this direction, which is right there, that is called the Panhandle. That one was constructed in 1865. So now you had property that was drained. You had property that had railroads through it. He thought this is a perfect time for me to start a village. Not in town, but at the final village. So if you look at that map closely, you'll see at the intersection of those two railroads, it says Hartsdale. He named it after himself. He built another house, the house that he had hired his wife with, and she never actually moved to this one, but he built another house on Hartsdale. And he was living there. He was farming the land, which brings us to this. These are interesting. These are actually 1973 photos. What this photo shows is the southeast corner of Briar Ridge Country Club. It shows the Joliet Cutoff, which that railroad still exists. And it shows the Panhandle at the time of 73, it still existed. Interestingly enough, the intersection of Hartsdale or where Archdale was, is the intersection of two railroads, which falls directly underneath the overpass bridge on US 41. So, what Mr. Hart tried to do was to build that building. He tried to get people to come. People just didn't come. The reason they didn't come is because Schererville, which wasn't the town at the time, had a church. He didn't have a church. See, they also had a bar. He didn't have a bar. What I think another interesting thing about this picture is if you look closely, north is to the top. So if we're going south on US 41 at this time, you would turn at the base of the bridge, which you get my pointer. They gave me a very expensive pointer. You turn at the base of the bridge right there. And you take a sharp 90-degree turn. Some of you might remember this. And then you take another sharp 90-degree turn to the left, and then another one to the right, cross over the railroad tracks, and another one to the left, and you'd be on 200 fertile speed, where he was a straight shot there, all the way to die. The access to the Hart Farm was not off of Main Street, and it was not off of 213th Street. There was no access to the barn. The access to the Hart Farm was on what is called Hart Farm Road. That road is at the face of the bridge on the north side. It's still there, and it's still called Hart Farm Road, although they do have two signs. They say Junction Avenue. What I have outlined in orange is what is there. Now, what's interesting in this picture, which was taken in 1973, is the white building to the top. That was the first of the AAA supply company buildings. So what you did is you came down, of course 41 wasn't 4 lanes back then, but you came down the 2-lane Macadam Road, which was nothing more than a stone that they got around to oiling when it got too dusty. But other than that, it was a very bumpy road, and we would turn on the whole Hart Farm Road, and you would drive all the way up to, on this picture, all the way to the end of the orange box on the left-hand side. And then you would turn, and you would drive on another dirt road, and you would go north, paralleling the railroad tracks, until you came to about a quarter-mile down the road, and you would see what's on there. You would turn sharp left, and you would go over the railroad tracks, and then you would head to the Hart Farm. Now, what you see on this picture from 1973 is prior to the purchase of the property. And you see barns, you see all kinds of things that would have to do with a farm. What you don't see is the house, because he didn't live in it. He lived at the corner of Piceville at that moment. And an interesting thing about this picture is there was a silo, and I don't know that anybody remembers this, but that silo was the last remaining building of this complex that Mr. Power did not turn out until about 1985. So with that ends my part of this story about the Harts. The last thing that I want to say about the Harts is that Karen Hart passed away in 1883. As I said, he dug ditches all over the place, and he was in the bottom of one of the ditches that he was digging. It was January, and there was ice, and a sheet of ice and the wall of the trench collapsed. The ice hit him in the chest and he died instantly. His wife was distraught. She wanted no part of farm. So she sold the house in Dyer and she moved to downtown Point, miles away. And she turned it all over to her sons to run the party. So time warp to the early 1970s. This is where we pick up with what we know today. I put this picture in here because I thought it was interesting. This is an aerial photograph of the Centennial Park area of Munster. Well, these are black and white because these are aerial photographs that were taken for the purpose of what I do for a living, turning these pictures into topographic maps so that we could design. What you see on this is you see the railroad track on the right-hand side running at an edge. You see Twin Creek subdivision, which was a subdivision that Mr. Powers built in the early 70s. You see to the north, you see the lake, which is the current lake out there at Centennial Park in Munster. And you see a road off to the left-hand side of the picture at an angle. That is Sheffield Avenue, or Columbia Avenue as it existed. And it used to go straight through. Now you can see the little curve there. That curve is still connects Calumet Avenue. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about in the pictures. Anyway, that was nothing more than just a drainage ditch or a dirt road. But on this picture, what you're seeing is Calumet Avenue, this straight line that is on the left-hand side. And is my direction right? Yes. No. Yeah. Anyway, it's on the side of the lake. It wasn't there. This was 1973. There was no Calumet Avenue that connected 45th Street to 20th Street. T&T. That was a dirt road. It was partially paved, very poor condition, and it led back to the garbage dump. On this picture in the pointer group, right here, what you're seeing is the Munster shooting range. That's where the policemen went in practice shooting the customers. Main Street's at the very bottom. It's actually not on this picture, it's further down. But Main Street was eroded this way. This is what you're seeing here is the very south part on this picture, the very south part of the park, or it would be the north portion of what you notice cobblestone subdivision. So the town of Munster decided they wanted to get out of the garbage dump business. It was expensive. It was eating up about at least half of the money that they got every year to keep this in operation. So they decided what they were going to do is they were going to open up the garbage dump to every community in the area that wanted to dump garbage. And they were going to open it up at like half the normal cost and fill it up as fast as possible. Just to get out of the garbage dump business. What they didn't realize is the amount of garbage that is generated. They couldn't keep up with covering the garbage on a daily basis with a 6 inches or so of dirt. The Department of Environmental Management and Stewart came down and said, you guys can't do this. You can't have open garbage with all these seagulls and all this nasty stuff, even though the people in Twin Creek complained, but the fact of the matter was, you can't get to stop. They received a telephone call from the city of Chicago. Interestingly enough, the city of Chicago is in the process of putting an underground parking lot at Museum of Science and Industry. They didn't really realize that Munster had this issue, but they said to Munster, we've got a lot of turf, and you guys take it. Serious. So the city of Chicago paid to have all of that material carted down or driven down here in dump trucks, just a procession of dump trucks, one after another. So to finish up this slide, there's a long time on the slide. To finish up this slide, Mr. Powers was heavily involved with community hospital, and community hospital is not the profit. So in order for community hospitals to spend money on public improvements, it has to be some road or something that is an arterial that leads to the hospital. Well, what road other than Calumet Avenue would be a better arterial road for community hospitals? So with community hospitals' help and with Mr. Powers pushing it downstate, Calumet Avenue got built. This next slide, this is a picture of the Hart Farm in 1973 on the very north of the picture is Main Street. All the way to the side of an angle is Plum Creek, and the other creek you see that has the trees on it, that's Dyer's Ditch. What you can see from this picture is nothing. There's nothing here.
Dennis, would you just use your pointer and point out where Main Street is and
This is Main Street. This is Plum Creek. That's Dyer Ditch. This was White Oak Avenue, where that ended into 45th, and this, which is now the bike trail, was at that Triangle Railroad. It was still an active railroad. So anyway, when Mr. Powers came out to look at the property, obviously I had to report him flying it around because you couldn't even get onto this property in Main Street, but access to each other. But so that brings us to the 1970s, mid 1970s or so, and Mr. Powers had a good friend by the name of Harold Root. Don Powers and Harold Root formed a partnership called PRA, or Powers Root and Associates. And they started pooling their money, and what they would do is, what they would do is they would pool their money together and they would buy parcels of land from these relatives of the Harts, which at the time were the Collins. And they would buy, Joe Williamson told me all this, but anyway, they would buy 70-acre parcels at the time. Now, why, I would imagine it's probably because it was pretty darn expensive land. Anyway, they would purchase 70 acres at a time they got enough money. So as the years went on in the early 70s, they finally acquired 250 acres, which is effectively the Sherrville side of Briar Ridge plus a little bit of Tyre. And it's everything on this side of Plum Creek, or up Dyer Ditch, where there's such uptick. So Mr. Powers went out and he hired Packard and Associates, a very well-renowned golf course architectural firm. They designed 18-hole golf courses around the entire country. At this point, they probably had 250 golf course designs to the name. And some of the more notable ones that I put on here are Ginsbrook, Palm Harbor, Florida, Enosbrook, Butler National, Oak Brook, Illinois, Sari Creek, Chesterton, Beagle Ridge, and Galena. And the one that really stands out that is probably the reason that Mr. Powers hired them in the first place is Ackerman Allen and West Lafayette. Now, the reason that he hired them, as I say, is because he was on the board of directors for, I believe, 17 years with Purdue University. He was also the president for about 7 or 8 years. Anyway, what he did then in the early 70s was he made probably his best decision ever, and or he did, very good, well, be that was your truck. So he went to Packard and Associates, and he didn't have anything. The way that Mr. Powers worked is he was an idea man. So he would give you what his ideas were, and then you would do it. Come back to it. If you didn't like it, you change. So basically what you see on this picture, this is the initial or the original pamphlet for selling lots and for being a member of Briar Ridge Country Club. The lower left-hand corner where that vicinity map, that's the Dyer side. You didn't own that. This is what he owned. So Packard and Associates came up with this, and then we refined it. It never went down the way it is shown. If you look at it closely, the upper corner, this is for Julie's benefit.
Thank you.
This corner here, that's Briar Ridge Unit 17, which is, there's a bridge right here, and it's all single-family houses. On this drawing, it was supposed to be condominiums. This right here was the corner that he did not own of the farm down here, and that was also supposed to be condominiums. Those are single-family houses also. In fact, I believe that Mark Haynes' brother Chris lives right about there. This was always intended to be multi-family. In fact, at that time, he called it country club condominiums, which that's what it is. This is Springwood condominiums, and this is Briar Creek townhomes. The other interesting thing is he had some property in the corner down here that he didn't know what to do with, so he put condominiums on that too. Now, what happens naturally is Mirfield Drive doesn't go like that. But at the time, he didn't own the property, and he had to list them around somehow. Now, anytime you do a development in a community, this is one of the first things that they ask you for a large development is, are there 2 points of access? There wasn't. There was only the roundabout at Main Street. So that's why at the very lower right-hand corner, where St. Andrews Drive currently intersects 213th, you punch that out, 213. That was only open during the day, and at 5 o'clock at night, it was padlocked shut. So it satisfied the town of Schererville that they had 2 entrances, but effectively, if you tried to go that way at night, you couldn't get out anyway. Done. This I thought was interesting because this is one of about 40 to 60 pages that were done for the original golf course by hand by Pafford and Associates. It shows a lot of information.
Really?
What you
It's
see
like a
live,
tornado.
what I see is information. This is 4 blue greens. If you take this perimeter right here, that's the outline of the green. These lines underneath here are all drainage that was put under the green, draining over to this drainage structure in order to capture the water when it sank through the green and get it off there. You don't even realize they're there, and probably most of them are filled with sand and sediment now anyway. Sand traps. See the sand traps around? And every one of these lines on this drawing represents a contour line of 1 foot difference. So this 40 to 60 pages of plans was given to a company out of Aurora, Illinois. I'm ahead of myself. This is on that. Yes, it was given to a company out of Aurora, Illinois. That company was Wadsworth Construction Company, and they started constructions of the golf course in 1970. 1976, 77. Anyway,
Be not music sport, believe it. It's the green intense civil. Still
13. That would be hole 13 on the original 18 holes. Both done. Let me catch up with that. I'm going too fast.
Well, hold on. So you said their theme was
That's me. That hole right there is on the blues board. It's a par 3. It's about 200 yards for men, 180 for women, and that's what they used to go from up there. So from 1977 through 1980, and I'll read these things, but you can read them yourself. First construction began, and Wadsworth Golf Course Construction Company out of Aurora, Illinois, came out here. It was a mess, to say the least. They had the giant hand machines racing around, picking up dirt, making it there. Piles everywhere. It's surprising that they actually got to it pretty darn close to what it might have been about. The construction continued nonstop. Now, what you have to bear in mind is there were no houses and there was no home construction at this time, just the golf course. The construction of that first 18 was completed in 1978, and this course was seeded in the fall of 1978. I put a little thing on here below that, which I don't think many people know, but the entire course was seeded in Kentucky bluegrass. The greens were bad as far as grass is concerned, was all of them on. The tees were bad grass, but the course itself, all fairways, all roughs, which is natural grass like you would have in basically in their yards. Eat. So the course was left alone. Nobody came out here, nobody did anything to it. In 1979, of course, Powers Room had to hire people to cut it, maintain it, keep it up. They were getting no income whatsoever. They put out all the money to have the golf course put it built, and it's amazing. You'll find out why in a minute. I added in subdivision design begins, because that's when he came to us and he said, okay, now you have a master plan, now you've got a golf course, he wants you to start appearing in front of towns, Cherville, Zaya, whatever, and he wanted you to get these approvals and get this done. We fast forward to the end of 1979, and probably the most important thing that happened to Briar Ridge Country Club in its history, he hired Jack Sudak as the permanent golf professional.
Yeah.
Now, he looked at these things. I put some things on here about that. I don't know if you can all read them or not. But Jack was born, he was raised in East Chicago, who graduated from East Chicago Roosevelt.
Yay.
Another person. So that means two. He worked as a caddy when he was younger at Wismar Country Club, and he became pretty close friends with Jim Roma. Jim Roma hired Jack as an assistant golf professional after Jack got his license. He worked there for 5 years. Singing bird. Okay. He then quit Widmar and he went to Plymouth Country Clubs. He was the head pro at Plymouth Country Clubs, and he worked there for 8 years. In late 1979, he was contacted by Don Powers, who asked him if he wanted to be the head professional at Briar Ridge Country Club. He jumped at it. He didn't have any idea that this was great. When he came to work here, he worked for 26 years as our head pro. We gave him a going away party in 2006. It was very well attended, and then he packed up and he moved to Napa, California. That was the last we heard of Jack Sudak. A couple of years after that, I don't know exactly how many, he returned to Briar Ridge because his longtime friend Gary Sawinski, who had been named as the head pro of Briar Ridge, asked him to come back and help him run the pro shop. There's a guy who's been drinking wine and enjoying himself at that one for years. He retired a second time, but we didn't have a party for him. He currently lives in Dallas, Texas, and he comes up here a couple times a year to visit his son, Jimmy Sudak, and his grandchildren, and he also has the Jack Sudak Oakland that we hold every September in Wisconsin. There's a picture of Jack.
Awesome.
I think if you saw him today, he'd have a bigger belly and a lot less hair. That is If you didn't have the opportunity to meet him, he was probably one of the most dynamic people would ever be. I personally don't know anybody who didn't like him. So that brings us to another important person in the development of Briar Ridge, and that was Palmer Singleton. Palmer was the attorney for Powers Group and Associates. Palmer was a very well-spoken man, was highly respected. And what Palmer did for Briar Ridge is almost unbelievable. This is a picture that I prepared, my company prepared, and it shows the outline of the subdivision. It also shows down the middle an orange line. That orange line represents what was the corporation boundary line between Cherville and Dyer. Did you notice the right groups of lots? Yeah. Well, you can't sell somebody a lot and he builds his house or his house and his kitchen is in Dyer and his front. Sure. So for that reason, Palmer Singleton took drawings like this and he had approached the town of Dyer, and he said, okay, here's what I want. What I asked me, well, not what I want. And this is Dyer, that's Cherville. I want this area, which was Dyer, annexed into the town of Cherville. This little portion along here, which was Cherville, annexed into the town of Dyer. This area here, which was Dyer, annexed into the town of Cherville. And this area right here, which was Cherville, annexed into the town of Dyer. And what that did is that created a boundary line or a corporation line in which Mr. Powers, Mr. Root could develop the property the way that the master plan was laid out. Unbelievably, the town of Dyer and the town of Cherville agreed to it. Now, you say, why did they agree to it? Well, that's a hard thing to answer because what Cherville got out of it was Springwood condominiums, about 15 or so single-family residential homes, and multi-millions of dollars in taxes. What Dyer got out of it was about a hole and a half of golf and maybe 5, 10, 15 lots. But he managed to get that done. This is the second thing that Palmer was heavily involved in that people don't even have any idea happened. This is a blow-up. This picture was taken long after the fact, so you would imagine this picture with nothing there, of the northeast corner of Briar Ridge Country Club. The Zanstras owned that corner. The Zanstras knew that Mr. Powers needed to buy that property in order to put in St. Andrew's Drive. In Joe Williamson's vernacular, they were holding him hostage. Now, the Zanstras the negotiations from the Zanstras were done by a man by the name of Chuck Zanstra, who was an attorney. The negotiations for Don Powers was done by Palmer. Mr. Powers was a man with a vision. He wasn't going to let this stop it. So what he did, which is just amazing. Now again, no homes were being built at the time. But what he did is he put in St. Andrews up to right there, and then he put a dirt road, and then he built St. Andrews from there up to the Clubhouse Drive and back into the parking lot. So you would drive down St. Andrews, entering, you brought them in, and you would go on a dirt road around the perimeter of the Zanstra property and eventually end up in the parking lot there. Ultimately, they came to an agreement. He bought the property, the Zanstras were happy, and St. Andrews
Trying to say that they put it. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of history I don't think anybody
We give it a memory. And
So we go to 1980. 1980 was the opening of Briar Ridge Country Club as we know it today. What's interesting about this is that, of course, he took memberships. The memberships for when they were opened in early 1980, maybe late 1979, and it went crazy. People flocked and wanted to be a member of a country club. What the people were that primarily came here were not the people from Woodmar Country Club that we see today, but it was all the people that played on the golf courses around here. And it was a price that they could afford. So they pay this fee, they hear all these great things about Briar Ridge, and they show up. This is what they saw when they got to the property. There were no buildings. This was Jack Sudan's cloak shop. It was a house trailer. That right over there, in that corner, and right over to the right of this is number 1 green. Jack did a pretty darn good job operating out of that and making sure everybody had you. Not so fat though. Not a problem. That was Jack's favorite saying. Thank God. So, 1980 went on without a ditch. People played golf. They came out. He couldn't drink. There was nowhere to drink. He couldn't eat. There was nowhere to eat. So they played golf and then they left. 1981 is when the development actually became reality. Now, We had gotten approvals from the town of Dyer, or town of Sherrill, excuse me, for the beginning of the development, and most of this, as far as the roads were concerned, were constructed prior to this. What you see here is Briar Ridge Country Club, Unit 1. This is St. Andrews Drive. This represents Clubhouse Drive to get in here. Wilderness Drive, all the way around to here. St. Andrews was extended to there, and Wilderness Court, which is a cul-de-sac, was put in. That was Unit 1. At the same time that this was going on, we also did Unit 2. Unit 2 is directly across the street on St. Andrews. Again, you come in on St. Andrews. This is Inverness Drive. Mark Haney lives right there.
St. Andrews.
Oh, whatever. You don't want to know that. This is Clubhouse Drive. He put in St. Andrews Drive was already being installed with Unit 1, and this is Presley. So with that opened up about roughly 140 lots, 150 lots that you could sell. This was 1981. So anyway, what I have done on this next slide, I did this for my friend Shep. I said I was going to get you. This is the federal prime interest rate. The covert of the history from 1960 to 2020. If you see at the top, it says December 1980, the prime interest rate was 21.5%.
Isn't that weird what you say?
Mr. Powers opened up the sale of lots in Briar Ridge Country Club when the prime interest rate was the highest that it's ever been, and has never come close to a function. And it says this. So, needless to say, lot sales weren't good. Not at all. The only people who bought lots out here were people who had the money and didn't have to go to a bank. I'm not sure that that might not be true.
We bought Margot Delta's finance.
Oh, did you?
22% interest.
Yes. That's such a deal. Sanity. But as you can see from this graph, it did come down, but it took until about 1985, of course, it used to start to get out. Anyway, I added that for you, Jeff, because I know you're a number 10. 1982 to 1987, and something happened here in the well, which I don't know how to fix. I also brought my son tonight. He's like, that's he does things like figure out, how to get voicemails and stuff like that.
I don't work hard.
So in 1982 through 1987, that was the construction phase of what we now see as the clubhouse, all these celebrations. In 82, pod number 1 was built. Pod number 1 is the St. Andrews room. And that was not a dining room, that was the pro shop.
Yes.
He moved from the trailer to the St. Andrews room. That's the very first octagon.
Yep.
That was all was about here. Jack's, being Jack, served beer, wine, snacks, and he had a microwave where he could heat up hot dogs for you. He sold all that stuff. It was amazing. Yes. 1982, the cart farm, the cart shed was constructed, and they started, that was out there out the parking lot. They started storing all of the golf carts, golf clubs, things like that in the cart shed. And the maintenance building, way out at the other side of the property, up 203rd Pool, that was constructed. Prior to that, the maintenance people didn't have anywhere to put their equipment. And they had tents. Now they tried to throw plastic around them in the wintertime, but it was a disaster, so they built the maintenance shed. As you see on there, in 1984, a fire occurred and the cart shed burned to the ground. Everything in it, all the golf carts, all of the golf clubs, all wiped out. The club didn't have any insurance for the people's golf clubs. So everybody who stored their golf clubs in that cart shed had to file it on their homeowners insurance order and get reimbursement of their golf clubs. In 1986, because of the crime rate going down, Mr. Powers purchased 150 more acres, which was the balance of the property on the Dyer side. He went back and he hired Packard to design 9 holes, but different than the first design, what he did is he asked us to do the land plan, and he asked Packard to take our land plan and then seamlessly add those 9 holes to the 18 holes that were there. So that master plan was presented to the town of Dyer in 1987. It's actually up there, but I had a picture that also, and this is what was presented to the town of Dyer. This actually shows the addresses, but basically what they did, which was what we did and what Packard did with this design, which is actually pretty amazing, is we took holes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 red and left them exactly as they are. Packard then took hole 1 white, which at the time was the 10th hole. They built hole 2 white, 3 white, 4 white, 5 white, 6 white, 7 white, and 8 white. And they took hole number 9 white, which in the original golf course you played 10, which was hole 1, and then you played, that was your second hole on the back 9, that was hole 11. And they turned that into, what now would I happen to yellows?
Just click. Don't click on the screen. Just click on the screen and aim.
Click. No.
The mouse.
I'll just stand in. Okay. They then took, after you would play the white 9 and you would end up at the end of the white 9 hole, you would jump over to what they call blue 1. Interestingly enough, blue 1 was the 13th hole on the original golf course. It was never intended to be the starting hole for a 9. Yes. I don't know any golf course designers who would design a hole that had water left and water right for your first shot right out. Yeah.
Then you have to go.
No sense. Blue 2 and blue 3 were new holes, and then they tied back into what was hole 13 or blue 4 and finished out the blue side, and they created 27 holes. He effectively gave Packard the same idea for the golf course that he had before. He wanted wide fairways, he wanted wide routes, he wanted a playable golf course within a golf course minimum. So, moving on, I have some slides here from 82 to 87 I thought you'd find interesting. This is the original guardhouse up on Main Street. It was dinky. You can only fit 82 people in this thing. What you see here is not the original gates. These gates that you're seeing on there, barely on this drawing, these gates go up and down. The original gates didn't go up and down. The original gates, when you pulled up to the entrance, they opened up like this. The ones when you came in were manual. So the guy in the guardhouse, he couldn't go to the bathroom as far as I know. He had to go all the way to the clubhouse with heaven. So if he wasn't there, he just sat. There was also a gate on the exit, which I never could quite figure out. There was a gate on the exit, and that was a big, long gate, and it was not manual. It was operated. When you drove your car up, it sensed you were there, and it would start open. From start to finish, it probably took 10 seconds. It didn't last very long. Somebody took that thing out right away. So they came back and they put these gates in, which go up and down, and they said on the leaving the country club, go ahead and leave. We're not going to gate you in. They didn't put that one in. This is a rendering that was actually done for the St. Andrews run. This would be looking around the golf course, and this was the idea. You can see part of it right over there. Anyway, that was the original rendering, and it was just, as they say, one pot. This is a picture of the turn as we know it now, when it was under construction. What's interesting on this is you see all the boarded up area behind the turn there. Those were all glass windows. That was right over there. And that's as far as the dining room went. You looked out over the golf course from there. So they boarded all those windows up and they built the extension going out to the north. And this ultimately ended up being a pro shop. See that from this pro shop from there to there. This is that almost finished. Interesting things you'll note on this picture. There are no doors here. These were the doors,
Yeah.
right there. There were double doors, so you came from a hallway from what is used to be the men's grow room, is now a park room. You came from a hallway, you walked through that hallway, you walked into the pro shop. Actually, that had a tag hole round, I don't remember what it was, but he had it set up in the middle of it, and that's where he operates some. Everything in that pro shop was clothing, golf clubs, things of that nature. The club didn't own that. Jack owned all of it. So that was all at this extent too. I put this in here just because Joe Williams told me it'd be a good idea just to do the image of what is Briarridge Country Club Unit 1. The road that you see circumventing the outside there, that's Wilderness Drive. Where you see the orange circle, that's the end of Wilderness Court. That circle is around 500 Wilderness Court. That's the first home that was occupied there for our respective club. It was the home of Dag and Donna Figge.
But no, was the first residents for
Down here.
home and wide.
Yes, they lived in Springwood condominiums. That is correct. Art, was it? And Anita? Art and Anita.
And the little pumpkins.
Right. They actually, that distinct for you team, they lived in the other half of the condo your brother bought.
Oh,
They were the first residents that lived in Spring condominiums.
Thank you very much.
So 1988 finished up with the additional 9 holes. They were under construction. As I said before, the streets and the infrastructure went in, and what Mr. Power said is we want it done quickly. So they had just an incredible number of contractors working out here. The underground company was Fueler Corporation, and they had 4 full crews working 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day, and they couldn't keep up with it. Of course, on the white side was seeded in the fall, and Mr. Powers and Mr. Root decided they were going to offer lots on that side of the course, all of the lots, for a down payment of 10%, and you didn't have to pay the remaining 90% of the lot cost until the street in front of your house was built. So people bought lots like crazy. They paid 10% of what they had to pay, thinking it took 7 years for him to build the Sheridan side. I'm just going to buy way over here in the corner of Briarridge Country Club. You won't be here for 7, 8 years. I'll have money. In 1989, the additional 9 holes opened up for play. As I described earlier, I got a little ahead of myself, but those were the holes that changed. And you look at the very bottom part, the streets were completed in 1 year. All of that went in, basically in year and a half. And he went to all these people that had bought lots, and he said, okay, you gave me 10%, now you owe me the other 90%. There were a lot of builders who had laid money down for maybe 10 lots that panicked. Because if the deal was, if they didn't pay up the rest of the money, they lost their down payment. So, and I don't know if they ever held us for that, but the fact of the matter was, That's what happened. They were shocked. You would never, in this day and age, see something of that size built in 1 year, including the golf course. So with that, that kind of ends my Briar Ridge history portion. But I did get, thanks to the ladies, 8-ton in a pole league. They took pictures from the beginning of the league in 1980. They still take them today. I think they take them of their opening luncheon, their closing luncheon, and the championship. All these pictures were taken with an old camera and developed, and they were in books in the ladies' lounge. And Mary DeBoer, whose husband Jim DeBoer passed away last year, was also Jim DeBoer, one of the original members of Briar Ridge. She was kind enough to turn all of those pictures into PDFs, and she sent them out to everybody in the league. So these are some pictures that I found interesting. Some of them have stories, some don't. This is a pretty good one. We're in the process right now of negotiating, and we're coming to a deal for new golf carts for the next 5-6 years here at Briar Ridge Country Club.
That's them?
Yeah.
That's them.
Nice.
Look at that car.
We're 1960 Miami.
Look at that car. It's a
People
three-wheeler.
came up to us as we were negotiating and talking about the new carts, and they said, well, are you going to have GPS? Are you going to have a connection that I can charge my phone? These don't even look like they're safe. These are 3-wheel golf carts. That's what we had. Now this picture is another interesting portion of this picture. It's taken across 9 Blue Fairway, and in the background, what you would see today are all the houses in Augusta Way. But at this time, what they think here? Not only that, but look at the size of the trees. This was a park built. Every tree on the red side of the golf course until you got back to where the farmhouse orders were planted by Mr. Bill Williamson.
Wow.
He would go at the end of every year, Mr. Powers would say, go to the nurseries around the area and buy up all their stock. So he would buy up, he'd buy hundreds of trees. And Joe has a degree in agronomy, so he knew what the trees were, but you planted them everywhere. So that's why for, I don't know, 20 years, you'd hit a ball and you'd go left of the green on a hole and you'd be in some tree that had thorns that were like 2.5, 3 inches long. Kidding. Anyway, moving on, this is a picture, and the reason I picked this picture, there's a good story behind this. It was taken right over there, and it was looking out. Those were the last windows overlooking the golf course. You can see in the back, you can see the bar. That bar is that bar right there. When you went up to the windows and you turned right, you could walk about 15 feet, and that's where the clubhouse ended. There were bathrooms for women and men over there. There were no bathrooms over here. There was one bathroom in the St. Andrews room, but it was kind of hidden. It was really pretty much used only by pro shop people. But the interesting thing about this picture is I circled in orange. If you can see that up on the wall, right there. That's a telephone.
I'm all the same time. One thing, there were no cell advertising.
There were no cell phones, that's right. The clubhouse had 2 phones. One phone was in the pro shop. There was 1 phone there. There was a 3rd phone that was in the coat room, and it was a pay phone. So anyway, I started thinking about this, and this picture was from 1983. At the time, tee times were not the same as they are now. Now, the rules and regulations of our Country Club were effectively copied and brought over to Woodmar Country Club. And Woodmar, I was a 7-year member there before I came here, but effectively it was a good old woods club. One of the rules that was written into Briar Ridge Country Club regulations was that women could not tee up on Saturdays and Sundays until after 11:30.
That's right.
No tee times for women. So, And that lasted until about 2000, where they changed it to if you were a regular member, you could tee up before 11:30 or could tee up at any times. But 99% of the women out here are not the regular members; their husband don't. So it was a way to get around it, but it really wasn't. Anyway, what happened with tea times is on Thursday morning they would take tea times for the weekend. At about 6:30 in the morning, those doors wide open and men lined up outside would come in and they'd sit down. As they came in, Jack Sudak would be sitting in the end of the bar right next to that phone, and he would take their name down. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and there'd be a list. And then everybody said they'd have coffee and they'd order something. At about 5 minutes to 7, that phone would start ringing. Non-stop. But he didn't answer it. At exactly 7 o'clock, he would say, okay, number 1 on the list is Bill Lewis, whoever, maybe, what tea time do you want? I want 8 o'clock Saturday morning, if you write it down. Then he would pick up the phone and he would say, Jack Sudak for Average Country Club? Okay, and then he'd write their name down. Hang the phone up and it'd immediately start ringing again, and the second person. He did that back and forth until there was nobody left sitting there who wanted a tea time, and nobody was calling in. He did that for probably 10 years, at least. I remember, because I was one of the guys who came every Thursday to get a tea time, but I remember when that ended, after all that was done, he just let out a big sigh and just go and he'd hide in his pro shop.
Yeah.
Well, that's a long story about that one. This is a picture of Blue Green looking back down the fairway. So what I thought was really interesting about this picture is that tree all the way to the right, that's still there.
It still looks the same.
It's way bigger than that fountain.
Yeah.
And it catches softballs like theoretically, as are all the other ones. This is an interesting picture because it's also blue-green, number 9, but it's looking almost straight west. What do you see in the distance?
Man, who owns Tiger?
There it was. This is an interesting one. This is the ditch between white number 9 and blue 9s. And in the distance, you can see nothing over there in Augusta Way, but what you can see is the pump house that's still there. The reason this is interesting isn't really shown on this drawing, but to the right of the pump house, there was no parking lot. That was a dirt road that led back to the pump house. That parking lot wasn't added until after the, okay, that was cool.
You're being not paying attention the last time you fixed it.
I wasn't watching.
Touch.
Bear with me, I apologize, I'm getting a little long-winded and I'll be done very quickly. This is a picture which I thought was very interesting. This is looking from the other side of the ditch towards white one green, right out there. You don't see anything behind it, but behind those trees, if you were to pipe your way through those trees, there's nothing but open farm field all the way up Calumet Avenue. So that ends my presentation as far as that's concerned, and now what I've done is I put together some questions, some trivia questions. Thank you. I hope you find these interesting, but these trivia questions, I don't want to go into great detail in regards to the questions, so I type them all out, but I'm going to ask. If you know the answer or you think you know the answer, raise your hand, I'll call it one person. If you're wrong, then most of you, I'll tell you the real answer. The first one. How many golf professionals has Briar Ridge employed over the years? Oh. Jared Thompson? 6. Thank you, Greg. Okay. Jack Sudak was number 1. He lasted for 26 years. He was followed by Ernie Sanborn, number 2. Gary Sawinski, number 3. Mark Swinford. Interesting story on Mark. Mark was hired in October. Mark quit the following January to become the club manager of Walsmore Country Club. His claim to fame is he hired Corey Nowak. Dane Brummett, Brett Nizwicki, and Josh. He got
So 7. All control. Yeah.
Question 2. And anybody out there tell me this is from the original pamphlet for Briar's Country Club, what green this represents?
Oh, now or back then? That was blue 7. Blue 7, yeah, blue 7. I didn't see it. I forgot.
Anybody?
We say blue 7.
That's very close. It's not even on the right line.
Oh,
That is red number 2.
red.
That picture was taken from the basket of a cherry picker. Look how many trees there are in the area now.
Right? Wow.
And in the back, red number
see the
3.
green.
Fourth one?
In the background, you see red number 4.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Question 3.
Not seeing no.
On the original 18 holes, original scorecard, what hole was rated number 1 handicap for men? What hole was rated number handicap for women?
The original scorecard. And the
Original 18 holes. My wife actually got this right,
Too red for the women.
which I don't understand because when we first joined here, she didn't play golf.
Nope.
Anybody?
I read from it.
Too red for women?
Okay, the answer that Tom Boyle gave for men was wrong. It was hole 6 red. The answer that Linda Henderson gave was correct. Hole 2 red for women. Okay, blue 4, which I showed you a picture of earlier, was originally hole 13. It currently has 3 sand traps surrounding it. There's one on the front right, there's one on the back right, there's one on the back. The original design, the way we played the golf course when it first started, how many sand traps guarded this straight? Pushing it down, by the way, yeah, the leg. Obviously, it's not for you, so.
That's a hard free.
How many sand traps were around hole 13 or 4 blue? Or
4. 4. Hard 3. Hard 3.
okay. Jim Bolanowski says 5. 6.
Wow, look at all
You
the
can see them on this film, which is from the original scorecard. There were 6. There was the one in the back left, and the one in the back right, the one in the right, and there were 3 other sand traps on the right.
That's just redundant.
And what was interesting is the original plan for this was for the cart path to go to the left side of the green and turn around behind it and then go to the next tee. When they put the cart path in, they went to the right side and they went right through the middle of one of these traps, so it ended up being actually 7. 1981, what were the names of the 3 touring PGA professional golfers that put on an exhibition on the driving range here at Briar's Golf?
Not watching. It means Corey Baber.
It was Corey.
One answer.
And Corey Baber was winning the.
Okay, who else? You gotta have 3 answers, Tim.
I'm watching.
And he says Tom Watson.
Ben's right.
The answer is Payne Stewart, Corey Pavin, and Bart Bly.
Like so God. It's the beer and the dinky now.
So they gave an exhibition on the driving range, and Corey Pavin stood up on the driving range, and everybody was standing up there watching him. And he said, okay, I'm going to hook this one 30 yards to the left. I'm going to hook this one, or I'm going to fade this one 30 yards to the right. I'm going to hit this one straight. People were amazed. Then he says, now I'm going to hook this one 60 yards left. 60 yard fade, 60 yard fade. And it was just amazing. The difference between these guys and us is beyond comprehension.
How did we get him here, Don? I mean, I remember that. Were they doing a tournament?
Probably it was the Western Open. I've been but
Oh, man.
The other thing I remember from that is that Payne Stewart was standing on the tee box, which was 10, which is now 1 white, and he was going to hit a ball from the blue tee. He was all the way at the back of the tee. And he turned to Jack Sudak and he said, how far is it to that ditch? And Jack goes, oh, that's like 340, 350. Payne Stewart went back to his golf bag, put his driver away, got his 3-wood, and hit the ball within about 10 feet of the ditch, middle of the fairway. Full wet peeled effect. Okay, we're getting there yet. Briar Ridge is hosting the Indiana section of the PGA Northern Open on June 10, 2024. This is open to professionals and amateurs with an index below 5.4. Brian Rich hosted this very same tournament in 1997. Can anybody tell me who the winner of that tournament was with a score of 60, a sports record, and 65?
Jerry Warner.
Yeah, okay, you okay.
He told me.
The work permit tells you.
Jerry Warner. Jerry Warner. Now, this is professionals also. He beat them all. Set the course record. It was amazing. This is the last question. The morning of the tournament, forecast was overcast with a chance of showers. The golfers teed off and played between 4 to 12 holes before a severe thunderstorm halted play. Play was resumed 3 hours later, and the tournament was completed. The next day, the Hammond Times listed all the players' names and their respective scores in the sports section. Only one player was shown with a WD or withdrew behind his name. Can anybody tell me who that was?
Not to run.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Let's keep that round of applause going for Mr. Drago. Now, next up, I would like to invite one of our committee members who has a couple of fun anecdotes and stories that they would like to share. I believe Mr. Heaney has prepared a couple of words. We would love to get your insight.
So I was asked to talk a little bit about. Can I move this? Absolutely. I was asked to talk a little bit about picking up the conversation about when the transaction occurred, the sale of the business, and I will do that. I won't get too very long. Seriously, it's hard to follow. No, serious. It's
Well, I tell you the truth, Mark, I haven't gotten anything done all week because this is all I've done.
Like we thought it was.
I'll just, it'll be fun to moment. So my name is Mark B.
So my
my name is Mark Heaney, and some of you have asked me about my brother Chris, who's important to all of what we're talking about here. And Chris has had 2 surgeries in the last couple weeks in his back, and I spoke with him a couple hours ago. And good, he's to be home tomorrow, and life is good. And thank you for asking about him. But I'm so excited, so pleased that we did this tonight. I can't tell you. So I was asked to talk a little bit about how did the sale work, and I want to do that. As I make my few comments, just in the back of your mind, keep the word Olympia Fields in the back of your mind, just as it is in media. So in 2010, Mr. Powers is getting older, all of us are, right? And we're beginning to wonder, what is the future of the club? What are we going to do? And had numerous conversations with Erwin Cohen, our superintendent at the time, and he came to us and said, look, if you wanted to have a conversation about the purchase of the club, now is the time. And so we decided to embark upon this. But you just don't just go and talk to Mr. Powers about acquiring one of his rights and go. So the question is, should we? And the other question is, how can we, right? So a number of people are consulted, and I want to talk about it. I want to list those people. Chris Heaney, Rich Peller, Fred Halprin, a little bit of Josh, Doug Angel, Tom Boyles, Don Turenga, Terry Jararski, Vern Olzal, Tim Eriks, Joe Williamson, Chris Morrow, Terry Smith, Jack Sudak, the POA, Ron Elchetti, Chet Dobis, and Dave Jansen, who represents the family, but was encouraging of a discussion in the here tonight. And so there was a decision, because of this feedback we were getting, let's go ahead and talk to some people. So contacts are made with initial investors, people who might be interested, members who might be interested. Rich Peller, my brother Chris and I did a lot of that, Rich and Chris especially. contacted many of the investors. The first meeting we held was on January 15th of 2011. A little quick note there. More than one person said to me that if Erwin McCone is not supportive of this, I'm out. And I just think that's important. Erwin made a big difference here, and we owe Erwin for his time here, but that actually was said. Ultimately, so there's quite a discussion. The first meeting occurs, and we're getting a commitment from 39 investors at the time. From the very first meeting, subsequent meetings, and in subsequent meetings of the board, I haven't been on the board in 4 or 5 years. I don't know what we talk about to start a meeting, but we often talked about our objectives. Why did we do this, and what are we about? And from the very, very first meeting, and what I'm describing comes from the notes that I have from all of these meetings. Item number 1 was preserve Briar Ridge as a 27-hole private country club. 2 was to operate the business in a prudent and business-like manner. 3 was to make a contribution to the Briar Ridge and the extended community. It was made very clear that if your objective coming here as a potential investor is to make a profit, there's nothing wrong with a profit, you might not be in the right room, because this isn't a great place to invest money if you want to make a profit. Profit might happen one day, but that's not the objective here. It's the objective that we described. My brother Chris and Chris Morrow were asked to approach Mr. Powers and the family. Frankie and Tim, the notes are clear. We're very positive about things. I imagine Don Esco was consulted, and I'm highly confident that Fargo was consulted on all of this. The notes are clear that the family was encouraging of this venture. An LOI, Dave knows this, the LOI was signed in March of 2011. Chris and Eni and Rich Peller negotiated the agreement all the way through, and folks, this was not easy. Dave can tell you about that. Not easy, not because the seller and the buyers were disconnected. They were not and never were. Had to do with outside influences and other investors who had other interests. But a lot of work during that period of time. The sale closed on October 24 of 2011. The first board was controlled by a smaller group of investors who actually pulled this together. They were called the, quote, Preservation Committee, and the reason they're called the Preservation Committee is because it was to preserve the legacy of Briar Ridge, as I described a moment ago. The Preservation Committee was Chris Heaney, Rich Peller, myself, Freddie Halpern, Doug Angel, Tom Boyle, Don Turinga, and Chet Dobus. Rich was our first president. I won't go into the 14 years. You're living it, sitting in it, and but if you think about the development of the golf course, the country club over the last 14 years, I think it's remarkable. So, I mean, we're thinking about the turn, this new restaurant, the patio, the pool is improved, the stonework. Jimmy Bolanowski is driving much of this. Stonework around many of the holes. Junior golf is huge. Junior golf used to be really small. Junior golf is huge. So there's so many things that we just don't really focus on, right? The tennis courts are improved, the pickleball and all that. It's a different place. I want to thank Sean, Noel, Michaela, and the team, and the board for putting this on for us tonight and caring about what it is we're talking about, right? We all think that Briar Ridge is a special place. I hope it is for another 100 years, right? I think you feel that way. I know you do. I asked you to think about Olympia Fields. Olympia Fields is 104 years old. Beverly, Ridge, Butterfield, you can name older courses in the Chicago metropolitan area. And they're proud of their histories, and they ought to be, right? But we're only 44 years into our 104 years that Olympia's been around, right? These old clubs should be very proud of what they've done. But here's the thing. It dawned on me getting my thoughts together. The reason tonight is important to me is because I hope that Greg and the board determined that tonight is the start of our focusing on, but remembering and be celebrating our history, right? You lived the history. You made the history. Well, of course, you knew a lot of this. You were reminded of stuff, but your children don't. Tommy Boyle and I sat here and go, I didn't know that. There's so much to know and so much to celebrate. And folks, we're only 44 years into the 104 years that other clubs have been around. So let's not take it for granted. We were founded by a great Americans. I think Margot could tell me, I hope Margot would tell me, that Mr. Powers would be proud of what Briar Ridge Country Club does today. I hope would like to. And I think that our children's friends, the friends of our children and their children, etc. I hope that we leave them a legacy. The things we talked about tonight is remembered. We remind people of it. We live it. So let's not forget it. Let's not let it get forgotten. And let's live it and celebrate it for another 100 years.